And I have a tribute by the Honorable Mayor Amor Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados.
Good afternoon, former Prime Minister Frendel Stewart, Deputy Prime Minister Santia Bradshaw, members of Cabinet, members of Parliament, former members of Parliament, members of the Democratic Labour Party, but above all else, members of Anderson, Peanuts, Morrison's family. It is said that a life of a service is a life well lived. And if we accept that, then we accept that our brother's life was well lived. I come here this afternoon out of duty, not duty as Prime Minister, but duty as Mayor Mottley. I was a young senator in 1991, appointed to the Senate at the very tender age of 25, not knowing much about parliamentary life. But above all else, knowing less about life. I was one of two people as an opposition senator. And from the time that I entered that chamber, Anderson Morrison, Peanuts as I would call him, with his permission in those days, held on to me. It may well have been that we both practiced a very bad habit. But if that bad habit is what bonded us together, then I'm grateful for that bad habit. We would find ourselves on the veranda outside the Senate chamber at least once an hour. And life is funny, and I'll just share this very quickly. This morning, as I was going into Parliament, I asked my PA to ask the Clerk of Parliament to go to Hansard and to pull out a few speeches from the 1991 to 94 period in the Senate from Anderson Morrison. The irony was that I couldn't read them at the time because I went with the Acting Attorney General to the registry. And I went to the registry to be able to deal with a simple issue of why our people are having to wait so long to get service for birth certificates, marriage certificates, anything to do, death certificates, and the whole shebang. Little did I know that the confluence of that visit, this funeral, and the Hansard would cause me to be reinforced in what I need to say here. Peanuts Morrison saw people, he heard people, and he felt people. He brought us up, and I'm not talking about his children now, of his personal family. I'm talking about his political children. He brought us up to behave in a certain way and to relate to people in a certain way. And for 3.5 years, he and I shared that bond outside of the Senate chamber every time we met. If I doubted, or anyone in here doubts what I've said, my first Hansard that I picked on this afternoon was January 15th, 1992, an amendment, Santia, to the Road Traffic Act, when we were calling for the regulation of the sector. Peanuts was parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Transport and Works, and it was his to introduce the bill. And I say this because even as I reflect, and I say this as much for the younger parliamentarians and for the aspiring parliamentarians, the fact that we serve different political parties never once allowed us to descend into depths that we would be regretful of if we were to look ourselves in the mirror thereafter. The language was, when he got up on a point of elucidation, and clearly I would have given away to him, where he said, I'm not trying to alter the transportation system. What we're trying to do is to regularize what has already happened. And I would have responded to him, two or three sentences, but I ended, he is genuinely my friend, and he knows that I have nothing but the utmost admiration for him. And then went on to refer to the fact that he remained always a man of people, a man of the world, a regular man, and that unlike others who might operate in a little higher circle, he remained who he was. There's nothing in my natural memory that would have caused me to go there this morning, but there is some kind of spirit that would have led me there. And I share this because I want others to know that the dignity of the gentleman whom we are gathered here to pay tribute to stood out more than anything else. He may have held ministerial office. He may have held the office of a parliamentary secretary. He held the office of a member of parliament. But none of those offices changed the man. None of those offices changed him. And I want his life of service and his commitment to himself, to thine own self be true, to stand as testimony to what we ought to aspire to, not as politicians alone, but as individuals, as Bajans. He was the salt of the earth, and he understood the importance of engaging and seeing everyone. And I therefore say to you, to his children, to his wider family, his grandchildren, to all of the rest of us, that we would do well sometimes to pause and to recognize that what is more important than the office that we hold is the person who we are. And it sounds almost trite to say it, but the older I get, the more I realize that things that are clearly patently obvious, regrettably, have to be repeated over and over and over. That we have gathered here this Friday afternoon to pay tribute to him is a matter of record. But what I hope will also be part of that record is that we do so with love in our heart, because Peanuts Morrison is the epitome, was the epitome of what almost every Bajan family wants to see of their children. A person with dignity, a person who related to all others well, a person who was independent of thought and fearless. His actions, had he not run, may well have altered the circumstances of history of the Barbados Labour Party. We will never know. But that he was fearless in believing that regardless of who he was opposing, that he would give it his best shot, and his best shot reinforced the biblical lesson of David and Goliath. I want to say to his family that I offer my own personal sympathy, because when I reflect on my own life and the values that I hold dearly, that as a young person, coming into Parliament for the first time and being forced to learn about life and people as a young person, your father played an instrumental role in my development. And that is why I'm here, not out of obligation, but out of a strong desire to say thank you, thank you, thank you. May his soul rest in peace. And on behalf of the government of Barbados, may I say that it is our honor to pay tribute to a life of service well lived. Thank you.